Saturn Conjunct the Galactic Center and Aspects Made to Natal Planets. That's the name of this presentation, and I'm going to bring attention to the fact that Saturn is currently conjunct the Galactic Center and has been since February. It's now April 26, 2017, the day of the Cassini new moon in Taurus, which I brought attention to in my newsletter and in a YouTube presentation, which you can see here as well. Yeah, that's an important and exciting theme currently, and I'm going to bring a little bit more attention to it. So I'll bring attention to what Saturn represents symbolically in astrology and what it can feel like for you if you have a planet conjunct the galactic center in your natal chart, and that Saturn has been since February conjunct that planet. All right. So this quickly is an illustration of, or a photograph actually, of the Cassini moon, the moon in front of the sun. Because the moon's at its apogee, it's furthest away from the Earth and conjunct the sun, which is what represents or is in fact a new moon theme, sun-moon conjunction in alignment from the Earth's perspective. And when the moon passes in front of the sun, we have that conjunction. When the moon is far away from the Earth, it makes the moon appear smaller. When it's close to the Earth, that's when we get, when it's perfectly exactly in the right spot, we get a perfect solar eclipse. And there's a pulse eclipses where the moon's a bit smaller, but then we see the rim of the sun around it. That's one of the more exciting ones, actually. And annular, and there's others. We won't go into that too much right now. There's different types of sun-moon conjunctions. The moon coming into alignment with the sun and forming a new moon, a special cycle of 29.5 days, which formulates its own special focus, a lens from which we can look at all the other planets in context, this waxing and waning moon. So it's like what I call a celestial brick in the wall. So this is the chart for that new moon. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I did in the other presentation. This is Saturn, though. This is the glyph of Saturn right there. That's 27 Sagittarius. It says 2727 retrograde today. Now the galactic center is 27 degrees Sagittarius. So generally speaking, we give about 1 degree orb either side. That's a rather conservative. Some might give it a bit more, but we're looking at an exact point. So 26, 27, 28 degrees Sagittarius is what we're looking at. 27 especially, particularly, is the bullseye point. This is the new moon, sun, moon, Taurus. This is a solar chart. All the degrees of each house cusp are the same as the sun and moon conjunction. It's just a way of illustrating a chart to makes it all equal for every location, because the house cusps will be different for each location. So that's why we do that. And I was depicting a Uranus-Mercury retrograde conjunction. That's one pair. Here's another pair and triple pair. Again, we're not going to go into that, but I'll leave it there. It's tempting to want to dive into it, but I already did, so I'll leave it there. So this is an illustration of, if we were coming towards our galaxy, imagine that, and there's our Earth, Sun, and the Moon would be in their relationship, and we'd be looking at the galactic center. There's Sagittarius constellation. It's not a perfect illustration, but I just wanted to give you an example. This is from the other angle where we, from the Earth's perspective, are looking to the galactic center, and the sun is conjunct it. Now, the sun is conjunct the galactic center about the 18th, 19th, 20th, 17, 18, 19, really, of December every year. So we can say, yes, every year the sun aligns with that point. The galactic center point is progressing. You should be aware of that. So it moves 1 degree every 72 years. So in 72 years from now, we'll be at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. And in 140 years, it'll be at 29. And, 200 years or so, 210 years about, it'll be 0 degrees Capricorn. That's another story, but I just wanted you to know that it's not a fixed point from the Earth's perspective because of what's called precession. That's what the whole 2012 thing was all about, by the way. Another story. Saturn, a beautiful planet. Everybody celebrates the image of Saturn because it's so lovely to see, and with its rings and so on and so forth. In astrology, though, it takes on a little bit more weight. Now, this is the glyph of Saturn. It's like an H. and we have the cross of matter with the semicircle below it, but we have a little hook, this little hook here. If Saturn isn't drawn with a hook, whoever drew Saturn doesn't really understand Saturn. Often I see an H, it's kind of lazy, they don't understand that the hook is the karmic principle. The karmic principle means what you're hooked in to do, what you're, and it also represents so your cross to bear. That's not always solely true of Saturn, but Saturn does have a sense of duty, responsibility, discipline, what you must do in your work. So it's also understood in this way. The Lord of Karma is a rather cryptic way of describing it, or mystical at least. The Master of Time. These are just ways of defining Saturn as a principle archetypally. Now, classically, when Saturn comes along, Saturn here, the great teacher is one description, the disciplinarian, the taskmaster, the sergeant. You get that sober kind of figure who means business. There's not a lot of joking around here, and it's, get things done and no messing. Let's make it happen. Now, this when Saturn comes along in transit, or even where it is in our natal chart, it shows a weight, what we must do, what our responsibility is, our sense of duty, beyond what we think we want or need, etc. It says, hey, you will do this, and we do. It's very interesting to show how we are living out the archetypes that are illustrated in our natal charts. Now, often when Saturn comes along, it can produce frustration, depression, despair, agony. So that we'll get back to that in a moment. But basically, the high side is that boundaries. Saturn creates boundaries. Now, Saturn's the furthest planet in the solar system that we can see with our naked eye. So there's a sense of the final reach, the final boundary. So that's a high side of it. At worst, there's a theme of restriction. So it's the plus and the minus. Wisdom would be the high side of Saturn, a sense of feeling the weight of responsibility, duty, the burden of what one must do is call it the negative. The productivity factor would be the high side, pressure would be the low. Timing and the ideals and the beauty of timing is the high side. The sense of delay that Saturn tends to bring is the negative in this particular case. These are just a few examples. There's more words one can use to describe Saturn. Saturn's often linked to our sense of responsibility in the world, which often does include career, but not simply necessarily. One could be a housewife or a house husband in this day and age and have a sense of responsibility. So responsibility covers a lot more ground. It's a better word than career, but it does point to career. And it does require, it activates and synchronizes with the theme of concentration, organization, action. This is where we get the disciplinarian, the taskmaster, the sergeant. It says, concentrate, get organized, take action, that type of command. And so, again, people often, when their Saturn comes along, can feel these words. And this is where they're not in tune, or they don't know what's going on or what's wrong with me. And people could really get, take it quite serious, get suicidal. Okay, so let's look at the sun. Now, by the way, when a planet's transiting, particularly we're looking at Saturn, and it engages with the natal planets, like they interact. It's not just one sitting on the other, although it kind of feels that way, but there's an interaction. So if it's conjunct the sun, at best, people born on the 17th, 18th, 19th of December, for example, the Saturn principle, the discipline could get energized at best. But on the other hand, Saturn conjunct the sun puts a weight of responsibility, almost a depressive weight, upon the otherwise playful, childlike, I want to have fun, see me, kind of attention-getting sun principle. In the deeper reaches, the sun represents a sense of purpose that we feel for our life. It's very much our who I am, what I am here to do, what my focus is. That's why the sun sign is so strong in astrology and why sun sign horoscopes work so well. Not as well as some would like, but they work at all. Even if they work at all is an indication, and they do. But they're certainly not the whole story at all. It's very much like having a sample of something, It's hardly the meal. It's hardly the grocery store compared to what astrology really is. It's just a sample, the sample booth where you get a taste of something when you're at the grocery store, for example. This is the symbol of the sun. It's like, remember the image of the moon in front of the sun. Now, that's not why the sun is drawn that way. It just so happens the Cazimi moon is very much symbolic or representative or illustrated like, that symbol of the sun, which shows the point of presence in the moment, and the circle around it represents, in a way, you can see times, like the particle and the wave, or you can see the Earth and the cycle of the sun around it and the planets. So there's a lot of interpretation, by the way, for any symbol, and the sun is particularly rich. So we'll leave it there, but trust me, there's a lot of insight one can get. You can even think of, you're looking down a long tube, and there's the other end, the hole at the end there, So there's many ways, and it's really exciting. But that's the symbol of the sun. That's the main point for now. So, and I just mentioned 17, 18, 19 of December, your sun is there. So that would be the date. That's what I'm basically trying to show. There's the sun. So we'll leave that. Now, the moon. The sun getting Saturn can be difficult enough, a sense of, this is no fun. The moon is even heavier at worst. It's the moon being sensitive and delicate in an emotional way. Feeling Saturn can be feeling cold and, not very rhythmic, kind of stiff and restricted emotionally. So there's not a lot of flow. It's like frozen water. There's the symbol of the moon, pretty good depiction. So I'm actually looking at the moon. The last time it was conjunct the Galactic Center, which it's showing right here, and it was on the 16th of April 2017, and sure enough, there's that conjunction. So if you were, in your natal chart, if you have the moon conjunct the Galactic Center 27 or 26 or 28 of Saturn has been conjunct it and will be into May. And again in November, by the way, Saturn is retrograding currently. It's going to go past the 26th and back into 25. And we'll still feel it a little bit, actually, by the way. But the final sweep conjuncting the Galactic Center will occur in November of 2017. And then shortly thereafter, in December, it will enter Capricorn and will no longer be conjunct the Galactic Center. But okay, so that's the main point there. The moon will feel the weight of depression. It'll be hard, but one can get into domestic duties and responsibilities in a positive way with Saturn. One can, decorate the home. It's not exactly inspiring. One can take one's role as a parent more seriously and step to the plate in a more responsible way than perhaps they have. And that would be the high side of it. Otherwise, it just feels depressing and limiting and lackluster. And what the heck is going on, people will wonder, and they could, get depressed and turn to substance at times, or anything that will serve to alleviate that weight and pressure and depression. This is Mercury, and a nice photograph of Mercury with NASA, thank you. And there's the image of Mercury, and it's a rather accurate image. You see the circle of spirit in the middle, the semicircle of the moon, which is of receptivity, and the cross of matter below. So that's a whole theme of Mercury. So I'm actually looking ahead here. Mercury at the end of the year, November 28, 2017, Mercury will be conjunct the Galactic Center. I just want to show because that will be Saturn again conjunct the Galactic Center just past the point. I'll cut 27.5 because it's 27 specifically. And if you have Mercury conjunct the Galactic Center in your natal chart, Saturn there actually could feel good. It gives you a lot of insight, a lot of determination to study, to want to get answers and information. Now, if you're not into that and you're resisting, well, obviously it's going to feel heavy and burdensome. And, I have this homework to do, but I don't want to. So often attitude is a key theme, isn't it? But it can at best leave us feeling excited about learning new things. And that even though it's an intellectual crunch, it feels good to learn. It feels empowering. And that's one of the gifts of Saturn too. We feel empowered. Venus. Venus is depicted like that, circle of spirit, cross of matter below. And so Venus conjunct the Galactic Center occurred back in November of 2016, for example. And there is at 27, well, actually I have at 2745. It's a bit ahead. so I was actually aligning it with the current position of Saturn, which is 27.5. So I was just doing this quickly. It's not so important this date as much as if you have Venus in your chart at around this degree. So I just wanted to give you a quick illustration. Saturn Venus is heavy and difficult, especially in love on one hand, or in your in the financial sense. So interesting that Venus is love and money, you know. It's not necessarily the love of money, but it can be, certainly. And anyway, Saturn conjunct Venus can create restriction and delay and lack. Lack is another key word for Saturn, by the way. We feel this lack of money or abundance, or doesn't leave one feeling terribly attractive. But at best, Saturn Venus leads us to gather new tools, skills, abilities, talents, you know, bring forth talents and hone them and so forth. So there's the high side of that. Now this is Mars, and the glyph of Mars basically looks like that. There's a couple of depictions, but basically like that. And there's now Mars conjunct the Galactic Center. Similarly, I'm looking back last year. Mars has a 2-year cycle, Venus 1, Mercury 88 days. So you get an idea that of the fact that they're not that far away. But Mars won't be there for another, year and a half. So it's worth mentioning, or so, that the last time it was back in September. But if you have Mars conjunct the Galactic Center in your natal chart and Saturn is conjunct it, you're going to feel a sense of drive. So this is actually one of the more positive combinations, by the way. Saturn conjunct Mars gives one a sense of determination, drive, willpower, etc. Okay, so there's the high side. At worst, though, if you're, for various reasons, or attitude or anything, there's various reasons why you could feel not so energetic. You can feel weighted. You can feel like a lack of enthusiasm for exercising, or being responsible and disciplined. So there's a lot of possible factors that go on with that. Jupiter, the big planet, the planet bigger than all the planets put together in the solar system, not the sun, of course, which is 99.99% of the mass of the solar system. So that's another story. Now, this is interesting because it just so happens that we're getting an illustration of big Jupiter and little Pluto, which is not technically a planet anymore, and it's now put in its own special category, and it's the first among equals there. We're not going to get into that, another story for another day soon, but just it's fun to get an example of the size of the Earth, Pluto, and how small that little planet is. But size is not everything in astrology, by the way, that's for sure. Now, there's the glyph of Jupiter, the semicircle, and the cross of matter, highly receptive to bring things down into the world, is a way of describing it. Now, I also included Pluto here because, and I'll show you in a moment, Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in the image. I'm going to show you, because last time Jupiter was conjunct the Galactic Center, it just so happens it was so while Pluto was there also. So that was the main point. There we go. This is back in 2007. Jupiter and Pluto were about, hovering right at that galactic center point together. Now, so if you were born in 2007, you'd be young, and you're listening to this, well, bravo. But, you'd have to go back a long time for that. But Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. So, it would be basically sometime in, 95, I suppose, prior. So then prior to that would be about 83, etc. Okay, where Jupiter was conjunct the Galactic Center. So if you do have Jupiter or Pluto, let's just play with both of them in this case, speed things up, conjunct the Galactic Center. Again, not many people who are of more mature age do have Pluto there because it wasn't that long ago. But we just want to quickly, I want to make a quick point that they were conjunct together at that point. And so Saturn conjunct Jupiter, also Jupiter is very enthusiastic and adventurous. So Saturn does bring weight and a sense of delay and restriction to that otherwise adventurous theme. Now, if on the other hand, if one did want to go on an expedition that required more of a sense of duty and a sense of purpose, etc., and equipment, and let's get, climb that mountain, let's do it, that could really work well. in the positive sense of the, sergeant taskmaster theme of, this is not just some, kid hike here. We're doing something serious. So that can work well that way. Saturn with Pluto would, create an empowerment. It concentrates the power principle at best. So that's actually a plus. It can give a delay or restriction on one's personal power. It's true. Saturn always has that potential, but at best, it brings a sense of empowerment and a sense of I'm going to get powerful with whatever my particular gifts are and strengths, etc. Okay, now this interesting is Chiron. I thought I'd bring in the centaur Chiron, the wounded healer, which be partially for a few reasons. One, it's there and it's important in astrology in this day and age, in Western astrology anyway, but also that Saturn and Chiron are currently square. So that's the symbol, the key Chiron principle. And now the last time Chiron was conjunct the Galactic Center was in February of 2001. Interesting year, by the way. And there it is, 27. It's again at the midpoint, 27 and a half. I just grabbed these quickly to give an illustration. But some of you, of course, teenagers now, will have had Chiron conjunct the Galactic Center, and prior was about 50 years prior to that. So, you'd be well into yours, almost 70 now, late 60s or something like that. And so you would have Saturn currently conjuncting your Chiron. Now, that is going to create a sense of need to be healthier, the need to bring a discipline and focus and so forth to one's health. The interaction of the two can, bring about an illness at worst. Usually the illness is brought about when Chiron conjuncts the planet, admittedly, when it is the transiting planet. But when Saturn hits Chiron, it can create a sense of, oh boy, I've got some healing to do. I've got a sense of things I need to attend to take care of myself, etc. So those are some examples. Uranus. Uranus, currently that's the symbol, that's the better symbol for Uranus. I've seen others, but you get the cross of matter in the center, the two semicircles on either side, and the circle of spirit below. Always those images. Now, Uranus conjunct the Galactic Center occurred back in 87, Christmas, interestingly enough, around December anyway. So there it is. Now, so if you were born in 87, you're just having your Saturn return, or you're just on post-Saturn return. Sometimes Saturn has a triple return, so you could be right in the midst of that. Like it returns, it retrogrades, and then it goes forward again, so you get the triple. That's another story. I'll save that for another day. But if you happen to have Uranus conjunct the Galactic Center, if you're born in 87, we'll keep it simple for that because it was 84 years prior to that. Or around that time, because again, Uranus generally, because it's a power planet, will retrograde. So it's not just that date, but that period. So you're around 29, 30, something in there. Or even if you're about 31, it might be close. So in any case, the main point is that Saturn brings that weight and duty and responsibility, etc., to Uranus, which is very freedom oriented. I'll do my own thing. So that can be interesting. The rebel is dealing with the authority. It can work well, actually, but it does generally produce a change. Saturn comes in and says, hey, ironically and interestingly, this is where Saturn's almost on leave. It wants to go shake things up. It almost wants to have a brawl. It wants to break through the walls, the barriers, the restrictions. It says, come on, let's break through this. Let's do it. Let's not just let this stand in our way. So it's that one time, especially when Saturn particularly takes on the role of kind of a shaker when they combine forces. But at worst, the sense of individuality is dampened, the sense of freedom, and I'll do my own thing. And up yours, Aquarius has that rebel factor. Well, it can be productive in a high sense, but it can also give one a sense of weightedness and dampen that feeling otherwise of liberation. Neptune. This is the last of the planets I'll focus on for this presentation. In astrology now, Neptune is the furthest planet because Pluto is no longer technically a planet. It's in its own special classification, its own new category. It's now the first among equals with Sedna and Eris and other small planets beyond Pluto, trans-Pluto planets. So Plutinos, they're sometimes called, and so forth. So Pluto sort of stands as a sentinel at the gate of those further planets. So that's another story for another time. But there's the symbol of Neptune. It's not bad. The semicircle should be drawn a bit more accurately, but you get the cross of matter below piercing the semicircle, and so it has this special between two realms theme. That's what that generally represents. So the last time Saturn was conjunct the Galactic Center was way back in '83. So that could well manifest as some of you here now are listening to this rather easily. You know, you'd be what, 34, yeah. And so, or about there, 33, 34, in there. And you would have this feeling of, in the most positive sense, you'd feel like I need to discipline my imagination, or you might feel like I need to meditate more. I want to get more spiritual. I want to get more serious about that side of things. On the downside, it's almost like feels like you've fallen into a puddle. It's going to feel like, where am I? Where's the boundaries? Because you see, Saturn just so happens to be the principle of boundaries, and Neptune represents the symbol of boundarylessness, and mysticism. It's very much linked to imagination as well. So the high side is a sense of discipline to your sense of imagination, or it can also be very mystical. So the same. I'm going to a yoga camp, or I'm meditating more, I'm learning about spirituality, etc. Or I'm working with my subconscious mind. Neptune also represents the subconscious mind in a lot of respects. So in the high side, that negatively, you feel a little bit lost and you don't know where to go and you don't have a sense of direction. It won't last forever, but it's currently like that. And it can also feel depressing at worst on your imaginative side, your sense of inspiration, another keyword for Neptune. All right, so that tells us a pretty good story, and I'm going to leave it right there just to show you a bit. Somebody asked me to do this, so I thought I'd put this presentation together quickly and just give you some insights there to recognize what it might mean when Saturn's conjuncting a planet, natal planet. And that we didn't go into the angles if it was your ascendant or your descendant or your ICMC. That's the 4 main points. By the way, if you do have a late Sagittarius ascendant and Saturn's conjunct it, and it tends to go over it, especially if it's right at 27, it means it crosses over, it goes back, and it crosses over again. That can be a difficult time at worst. You can really feel a lot of weight in your overall expression, but you're starting to get really determined at best. Again, the same principle is always there, but it's not an easy one. So you really have to have a really good attitude for that one. If you have a Gemini at around that degree and it's on your descendant, that galactic center, you're feeling a new sense of responsibility, a new level of commitment. So that's actually a positive. So where the ascendant self-expression, and it gets a bit hampered and dampened at worst with Saturn there, the descendant is more your relationship life. So Saturn is exalted in Libra, the sign and house of relationships, the 7th house, the descendant. So it actually is a plus. There's a new sense of responsibility now, unless that's been imposed upon you, like, there's an unwanted pregnancy or something of the sort. Well, that can feel difficult at worst, but there is a sense of commitment that emerges. So that's the high side. If you happen to have late degrees Sagittarius galactic center on your midheaven, on your career point, that's also rather a plus. However, Saturn up the midheaven does give you a new level of prominence and authority, but it also has the weight of duty. So you have work to do. I always depict that one as like you're standing on it's like the top of the mountain. It's cold up there, and there's a sense of, whoa, this is kind of hard to be up here. It's nice to be here at the top, but it's not easy to stand there just comfortably. It's not a comfortable position, but it's a powerful one. So take that in the best light. if you happen to have Sagittarius, Galactic Center 27 Sagittarius at the IC, the nadir, what's called the root of the chart, then it's another level of, ooh, this is difficult, a sense of anxiety and insecurity and so forth that can occur even while it crosses through the fourth house. It's a sense at best of retrieving what you really have. What goods do you have? What talents? What achievements? What can you work on? And it pushes you to lay claim to those, to identify them and to do the work to lay claim to them. But it's not easy, and one can feel anxiety, weight, depression, despair, those words I mentioned earlier. So be aware of that. If you happen to feel those things, you may, oh my God, I have Sagittarius at the galactic center of the fourth house cusp, and Saturn's there. Now I get it. And that's how astrology can work. So there you go. I hope that was helpful and entertaining for you. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.